Hi, welcome. This is Jeff Custer, and this is the Wednesday night Bible study for the Fort Walton Beach Church of Christ. I'm glad that you joined us for our study. We started last week studying 1 Peter, and the general theme that we're following is a certain hope for uncertain times. And of course, Peter is dealing with Christians in the first century who are living a time of persecution, and they have uncertain times, but so do we. And I don't think in my lifetime there's ever been a more uncertain time than the year 2020. And the message of 1 Peter is for us as well. Last week we looked at Peter, and as we talked to Peter about Peter, we saw him as an apostle of hope. This week we're going to continue in 1 Peter chapter 1, and we're going to concentrate on verses 3 through 5, and I want to read those to you. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. According to his great mercy, he has caused us to be born again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, to an inheritance that is imperishable, undefiled, and unfading, kept in heaven for you, who by God's power are being guarded through faith for a salvation ready to be revealed in the last time. And so these words written to Christians in the first century speak to me as well. As we get into this, I want you to think about having a reservation in a trip. I mean, it is a good thing to have a reservation when you're off traveling and know that at the end of the day, you've got a room waiting for you. You may have done what we've done. Sometimes we would take off on a trip, be traveling down the interstate and not want to have a reservation, just expecting to be able to find a motel room. Often that has worked just fine. But one time we were traveling from Arkansas to Pennsylvania, and we didn't have a reservation. And we thought that we could get a room because we weren't really by any major tourist attraction, we didn't think anyway, and by no really huge cities. And we knew there were many motels at every exit along the interstate. But lo and behold, we stopped at the first exit after reaching the point of exhaustion where we couldn't drive anymore. And none of the motels that were there, about 3 of them, they were all full. We went to the next exit, got back on the interstate, drove to the next exit, same thing. And I asked the lady at the motel as she turned us away, "Oh, what's going on? How far do I have to go to find a motel?" And she said, "Well, you know, we have tens of thousands of people have arrived for the NASCAR race at the Bristol International Speedway," which I didn't know about. And there aren't any motel rooms for a 150-mile radius. So off we went, and we had to tough it out through and drive through the night, spend a couple of torturous hours in a rest stop trying to get enough sleep just to get through until we could arrive in Pennsylvania in the early morning. But it's much better. We learned our lesson. It's much better to have a reservation. And I think you would agree as well. You know, our lives, they are like a journey. And we are traveling through this life. And it's good to know at the end of this life, we have a reservation. And our reservation is a reservation in heaven. And it's good to have that. I think most Christians would say, yes, I believe in heaven. And I trust that, I will live in heaven forever, and that heaven is a wonderful place. But if I were to ask you, are you ready to go today? I bet it would be hard to say, yes, I'm ready today. For some of us, we would say we're not ready today because we've invested too heavily in this life. We have put all of our energies, all of our dreams are here in careers and in vacations we want to take and family we want to enjoy. And we just can't bear the thought of leaving this life. Jesus talks about this issue in Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 20. He says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal." Yeah, the problem is we've laid up treasures here in this life. And furthermore, a lot of our worries and anxiety, stress comes from these treasures that we have in this world. We have those things, trying to maintain them and trying to protect them. And we live a life that isn't the life of peace and joy that God would really intend for us to have. I think what we've done is we've forgotten that our lives are just a little short part of eternity. That God intends for us to live with Him forever. But we are so concerned about this little beginning, this journey, that we've forgotten eternity. We've invested everything for the here and now and aren't investing very much for the hereafter. Most of our existence will be with God. It makes sense for us to put our treasures in heaven and not put our treasures here on earth. If we were to focus our attention not on things of this world, in this life, and instead put our focus on the things in the afterlife, on the things of God, on the spiritual things, many of the stresses and anxieties that we have would go away. Well, Peter, he wants to address the stresses and problems of the people in his time. Peter writes to the scattered church in Asia Minor, and they are undergoing persecution. He calls them, trying to remind them that this life isn't everything that we have. He reminds them that they are aliens or exiles or sojourners. Different words are used in different Bible translations in verse 1. And I think he does that to try to remind the Christians that are under persecution, that are receiving his letter, that this isn't all there is. That this life isn't meant to be fulfilling for all time. To remind them that this world is not your home. To prepare instead for living forever. So, we need to see this life as not our final destination. This life is just a short journey to get to that final destination. And our final destination is heaven. And so when we realize that, then all our stresses and all of our worries take on a different meaning. They're shrunk down to their proper size. Well, Peter, after the opening verses that we discussed last week, Peter begins with praise. And it's interesting. He's addressing a church that's undergoing persecution and difficulties, but he begins with praise. And you know, the Bible is familiar with this occurrence, to combine praise with persecution. Now, when you go to the book of Acts, you see it many times. You see this happen with Stephen. He praises God when he's persecuted. You see it happen with Silas and with Paul, and of course with Peter. When they praise God, it helps remind them that this life and what they're going through is just temporary. And this suffering that you might face in this life, it's it's not going to go on forever. That in fact it's just a blip, just a short time, just a few seconds in eternity. Will help you to get through, help you to endure. I don't think that this is a familiar concept always to Christians today. maybe familiar concept in the first century, but I've noticed many times Christians, when they have a family tragedy, that they abstain from going to worship. And I understand in part why this happens. It is difficult to go and worship God after a family tragedy, maybe after a death or something like that. And people just want to be alone. But though it's very difficult, I think it's also very important to be praising God during those times. It doesn't just honor God, but it also helps us to put everything into perspective and helps us get through the difficult times. James writes in his epistle, he says in James 1 verse 2, "Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds." Yeah, how do you do that? I mean, how can you count a very difficult trial? How can you consider being joyful about that? And the secret to being able to do that is knowing what comes afterwards. That afterwards comes the reward, comes the arrival, comes the reservation for heaven. You may have experienced going to Olive Garden or some other restaurant and having to wait for 45 minutes. It's annoying. They used to have, well, actually I know they still have an app that you can put on your mobile phone called Open Table. And using that app, you can put the location where you are, and it will give you a list of restaurants and reservation times. And you can go ahead and reserve a table so that when you arrive at the restaurant and you give them your name, they greet you and they take you right to your table. That's the way heaven's going to be. God knows that we're coming, that we have a place reserved for us. I'm reminded of the song, "This World Is Not My Home." Do you know it? This world is not my home, I'm just a passing through. My treasures are laid up somewhere beyond the blue. The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Yeah, we need to remember that this world is not our home. This is not where we're intended to be. And we're just passing through. And I'm so glad that we have reservations. In our passage in 1 Peter, Peter tells us that we have a place that is reserved in heaven for you. It says reserved, or in my version, it says kept in heaven for you. That's a wonderful thought, that when we arrive there, we not only will be expected, but they have prepared for us. Jesus pretty much told us that already. Jesus said in John chapter 14 and verse 2, he told his apostles that he was going to go and he was going to prepare a place for them. He has prepared a place for us as well. So when we get to the end of this life, everything will be waiting. In 1 John chapter 5 and verse 13, John writes that we can know about this. We can know that we have heaven. We can know we are saved. And that's pretty important. That makes it easier to bear with the struggles and the difficulties of this life. Peter uses the word about this hope. He calls it a living hope. I think the King James says lively hope, but most versions will have a living hope. What does that mean? It means it's going to be there for you, that you can depend on it. When Jesus was crucified on a Friday, one of the things that happened when he died was it became incredibly dark. But there came a morning, a Sunday morning, when Jesus arose, when the light came out. You might have heard the statement, it's dark on Friday, but Sunday was coming. God has in store for us wonderful things when we get past the dark times, when we get past the difficulties. Peter understood that because Jesus rose from the grave, because of what Jesus had done, our hope it exists. It's a living hope, and we can depend on it. And that his church and his people have a reservation waiting for them. Jesus was not contained by the grave, but Jesus went to heaven. And there he waits for us. Glorious, glorious hope that we have in heaven. The things of this earth can easily be described with three words: corruptible, defiled, and dying. And you know, we see this every time you tune into the evening news. You see how this is true of the world. I mean, things are not good, and things will never be good in this world. But there's more than just this world. Because of what Jesus did, we have a hope, a living hope. And so instead of corruptible, defiled, and dying, we have heaven, which is incorruptible and undefiled and unfading. And so Jesus tells us, listen, where your heart is, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And that's why we need to attend to our hearts and make sure that our hearts and our treasure are in heaven. I've done a lot of traveling, and I've stayed in a lot of hotels around the world. And some of them were just incredible. They were beautiful places. I'd love to go back. Some of them were real dumps, and I've slept in places where I kept my feet up off the floor. And you've probably gone through things like this. One thing that all of those hotel rooms had in common, though, is none of them were home. And I was always eager to finally go home again. Nobody wants to live forever in a motel room. Nobody makes that mistake. No place is like home. And if you were to go to a motel room and you decided you wanted to make it more like home, and so you decide you're going to change the bed to be more like your bed at home, and maybe to paint the walls of your motel room a more pleasant color like at home, to put other furnishings to make it more like home. To spend all of that on a place that you're only going to be a week would just be crazy. Just crazy. But that's exactly what we do in our lives. We're only here for a short matter of time. Our lives are like a week at a motel. We shouldn't be investing so much in this short life that we forget that this world and this life is not our home. It's not where we're meant to be. We are the aliens, the ones that are here only temporarily, that don't fit into this place. I'm just passing through. And if we would remember that, then our focus would be off of our problems. And because they're off of our problems, and thinking about this living hope that we have in heaven, not only would we secure in our minds and the reality of heaven later, but even the problems of this life would take a whole different aspect. I want to challenge you to put your treasures in heaven. Put things in perspective. Remember what you're going through is only temporary. Remember that what you're investing in shouldn't be just the things in this world, these temporary things, but rather the permanent, eternal things that are the things of God, the spiritual things of life that lead you to and secure for you the heaven that you will live in forever. Thank you for joining us for our Bible class today. I pray it's been a blessing to you. And please join us the next couple weeks so we can continue to encourage you in your faith. Next week, we're going to hear, the next 2 weeks, a special guest lessons from Amon Brown. And I really look forward to hearing what Aman has to say to us in our Wednesday night classes. And then the last week of December, I'll come back and we'll continue our study of 1 Peter. Thank you for joining us. Goodbye.